difficult to make something that is mediocre. For one, I've had a lot of pressure to be better and to be successful, or the definition of successful has always been relative to my parents. So I haven't had kind of a predominant voice inside of me that is able to be projected out and say, this is successful for me. This is what I believe in. This is my vision. Quite often, I have predicted some things such as QR codes being used in advertisements, such as investing becoming more mainstream. These kinds of predictions, such as even Bitcoin rising in value and in attention because of decentralization and how it's one of the main core platforms that holds value rather than tries to sell you a software or a product or whatever. That's also been a prediction. I've had a lot of predictions in my life, I've noticed, that have become true, and I've had some false ones as well, so by no means perfect at all. But I've noticed that I have the ability to see and be honest with what I'm seeing. I can see a lot of people that can see things happening and see things shifting, but they're not honest with themselves. And if you want something reliable in your life, you need to be honest. You need to extract it and be face to face with whatever you're seeing. And a lot of people are unable to do it this current times. A lot of people are taking a lot of information, not being good at filtering them, and not being able to reflect on what they're seeing, but rather react. You know what I mean? So in this video, you could be reacting to it, or you could be vibing to it. You could be, depends on the video. This video is a bit more thoughtful, and you've got to be thinking a little bit and maybe thinking about yourself in what I'm saying also, kind of seeing the similarities and what you think in addition to what I'm saying. So with all of this kind of information and all of this way of living that we are used to, we can often be blinded by what's trending, either what's trending or what is traditional to be done. So why is this a bad thing? This is a bad thing because, one, you're very, very easily swayed. All right, as a man, that's not a good thing, especially because as a man, you need to be able to hold your ground more than what a woman would be doing. That would be a masculine and something that you have from your birthright. You have the natural abilities to be able to say and think your own I don't know, I'm not going to get too much into that because I'm going to say a lot of things that are not very accurate in that case. But on the topic of the internet and seeing shifts in our lives, we need to be able to cut out the rubbish, cut out the judgment from people. That's what I had to do in my life in the past 2, 3, 4 years. I isolated myself more from my parents when they were on holiday or whatever was happening, and due to my age also, partially, 24, but also because, by the way, I really appreciate the comments and people seeing it and just good things. I didn't expect people to care like that, so I appreciate that. But on the topic of how we live, you can't let judgments of other people to sway whichever way that you're going to go, and you need to isolate yourself sometimes from your parents or your partner. And I believe in relationships also that You need to isolate sometimes, each of you, here and there. And that is completely natural, not to be together 24/7. I believe that's a big red flag and unhealthy. But same with your parents, same with your friends. You need to be able to isolate yourself and gather whatever that you believe in, whatever that you feel, not your friends feel, not opinions that your parents have, what you feel solo. And what it did to me is it made me able to structure how I think and how I behave and what's normal for me. You know, there is some conditioning behavior that happens when you're around other people where you just copy to, I guess, fit in and try to be one of them. And it's like a normal human response. Everyone does it, but I had to be more in touch with myself. And to be more in touch with yourself, you have to be alone. You have to isolate yourself. You have to go on holiday by yourself with no one with you. And it feels weird at first. You know, when you look at people look at you and you talk about where you've been, what you've been doing over the, I don't know, summer holidays, and you're just chatting. It feels weird that you went by yourself. It's like some people, not all, but some people look at you like, that's kind of lonely. I would be dreading that. I believe it's a normal part of life to be yourself and have different experiences just alone. You know, I don't believe it as a handicap or like a reduction in life value. So for me, what did that do? That made me able to be myself, one, and able to follow my own path and see my own path. You know, what's my path? What do I believe in? What's my vision? What do I see in shifts in technology, in the internet, in relationships? And the performance conditioning becomes a lot weaker, which is very, very valuable to me. What I've realized, very valuable experience for me, that I became less performative, because I don't think it's just me, but people in general, they become performative with who they are with anyone they are with. It doesn't even have to be someone very important. Usually, most of the time, like 90% of the time, you become not to make them uncomfortable, not to make them, and to kind of validate. You know, you're passively validating whatever. You know, if they like to eat Subway, then you go and eat Subway, for example. And you don't think about it. You don't think about how you're feeling, what's your health like. You know, maybe you don't need a sandwich right now. You need yogurt, you need granola, you know, you might need something else. And so that was like really basic. If you think of it as more of a broader sense in your life, if you're able to have some complexity that is more personalized to you, I think this is extremely valuable in the times of today. The times of today, we are surrounded by a lot of complexity that feels overwhelming to most people. That has been, like, for example, you go on X and you see on your feed 20, 50 different opinions about a specific topic. One of them, you know, 5 of them might say that you're missing out on the crypto, you're missing out on AI, you're missing out on finding a job through this method, you're missing out on relationships, for example. They might show there's 5 people in relationships. So you're constantly chasing something. You are constantly in a limbo of, you know, you're not in control of your reactions. You're just reacting constantly, and it's just passive. You don't even realize it. So many times when we are recommended a video or we go through something, we are reacting passively. Like, you feel like you're consciously thinking, you are actually thinking, but you don't realize that you're not actually thinking, if you know what I mean. If you're actually thinking, you must be in silence by yourself, and doesn't have to be silence, but I say it more of a not in a literal way. Go by yourself to eat dinner in a restaurant, for example. That is a good way to be one step towards more aligned with yourself. Once you have a system for yourself, a foundation, a working field, a character, that is unique to yours without a judgment, and then you're able to accept judgment better, rather than trying to shift into whatever you believe is your identity, because that's what happened to me. I dyed my hair a blonde, and my parents, I remember my dad, for example, he didn't want to go to a family gathering with me because my hair was blonde, So the pressure of changing yourself in a certain way makes you behave very differently, and not how you would to find your route, your route, your path, your destiny, if one would believe. So to be in line with yourself and see, this is me, this is not me, and to have your natural changes in stages of your life, you need to be able to experiment without any judgment, so that you can accept judgment better later. This is what I realized. This is like so crucial, because when you get judgment later, it's no problem. You're like, all right, cool, I can shift these parts of myself, but I know that as a core, I believe in this. So for example, I believe that blonde hair doesn't necessarily make me cringy or immature or childish or lost his way, for example, like our culture, my background from the country Turkey that I'm from would believe in. They would have that belief commonly, and I wouldn't have it in myself. So I would be the priority. I prioritize myself, but I still take in other people's opinions. This is something that people should be doing, especially now, because there's so much affecting, swaying what you're gonna do. When I was in middle school, I was struggling a lot to be myself. There was a lot of pressure, and I was used to pressure. I was always performing under pressure, and I realized that this wasn't me. The performance under pressure and trying to be successful wasn't me. It was actually causing me to fail even more. So even though sometimes I was succeeding in what I was what I was aiming to do, not even intending, they would give me a target, I would achieve the target, but I realized this is not my path. Success doesn't necessarily mean you're doing a good thing. But typically as people, we think to ourselves, if I've got the job, then I'm going the right way, aren't I? It's better to have a job and have the chance, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, to not have a job. That's the assumption that I realized is wrong in my life. I'm just saying, in my life, I realized this is wrong. That's not the case whatsoever. Unless you're in a really bad economical state and you need some money urgently, otherwise you're not going to have a roof over your head, then that's a different story. So I had to, one of the most important things I had to do in my life, I'm just saying this as simply and as brutally, boldly as possible, make your own note system. Notes. Bring back notes. Bring them back. Make them trending. Do it for your own life. Forget everyone else. Do it for your own life. And you will see how much it impacts what you do. You don't realize that you're subconsciously always doing something. If you're shopping somewhere and you're doing it for the next day, you're subconsciously doing that. You're not actually thinking very well of what you're doing. So for you to be more in line with your emotions that you feel on the inside, regardless of any social media or the internet, and in line with what you want to do, if you want to be good at being productive and emotionally in touch with yourself at the same time, you need to take notes. That is the simple answer. You need to take notes. You need to be really good at gathering complex information also, because you will have too much complex information, unfortunately, in these times. If you were a farmer, probably you're going to have very, very simple information to jot down. You need to be good at making the complex stuff simplified, but also not inaccurate, not in a way where you're missing out the details too much. So you need to be the judge of that, however is reasonable for you. Well, so what I've been doing for myself is I'm using Claude Codes to use my own system. I'm not going to use too technical terms here. To use my own laptop in order to make notes in the way that I want to do, instead of any software or any app that makes me do something in a very specific way, and that's the only way I can do it. So the better you can organize your thoughts, the better you will have as a root, as a person, as your thoughts, emotions, relationships going to be better, because you're able to function better. Function is all about the RAM of your mind. So the RAM is like a computer piece. It's what stores the memory. The better you allocate your memory and prioritize, this is what I need to think about, this is what affects this, and know the dynamics of what you do, the better your results, solutions, performance, and in touch with yourself you will be. I just haven't seen this from any other YouTube video. Maybe I didn't come across it, but there's too many people talking about, the economy being bad, and people being in a certain way. People are positive, negative. This place is better to live than that place. For example, Thailand is better to live than the UK. Germany has fallen. It's very tough to buy a property there, etc., etc. Rather than the most important parts of someone's life, and that is your thinking, So rather than making a bunch of scattered thoughts, you need to make it compact whilst also having some of the scattered value inside of it, because our time is so valuable right now. There is so many videos, there is so much products, there's so much software, but not many of them, 99% of them, are just not useful. You need to be good at you. That should be one of the basic, primary, massive targets. You need to be good at being you. And I was in an environment when I was younger where I couldn't be me. I couldn't be able to think as myself, able to experiment as myself, able to understand and see what is important to me. I thought things that are very far away from me are also as important to me as things that I'm having in my life right now, which is not, But there was no parent to guide me. There was no parent to say, the conflict in Ukraine is not the main priority in your life, or it's not one of the main priorities. I didn't have that, So I thought, if I give £10, if I give £50, even though money is tough for me, I will be able to help the cause of Ukraine, which I won't. This is what I realized. For me, no, if I give £10 a month, I'll be able to save some animals. If I give £10 a month, I will be able to save cancer, maybe, for cancer research. I realized this is not the case. You need to focus on yourself first. If you're able to survive, if you're able to thrive, then help. Go ahead. You have extra resources, then great. But a lot of people are heading towards the reaction. They are heading towards, I'm going to try to rescue. I'm going to try to shut them down, It's gullible. And I was thinking in a gullible way in this way of thinking. I hope this gave some overview of how I live now. And thanks for the comments and likes if you're watching till now. I really do appreciate that people actually care about not only me, but like people in my kind of situation, which for me, I lost a lot of hope because there's been a lot of people in my environment that just they felt like zombies. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't care. It's like a lot of people, there was some people that didn't care whatsoever, but there was a lot of people that just felt so exhausted. Everyone's so exhausted. I feel like everyone's watching too much content. They're consuming too much content. They're consuming too much food, too much tech, too much entertainment, to the point where they can't socialize. I've noticed that. I've noticed on YouTube, you watch 3, 5, 50 videos and you don't socialize. I think this is crucially wrong, right? I think in every single one of our lives, this needs to change. We need to consume less and we need to actually connect. And I'm just hoping that I'm helping even in 0.001% of a way. For me, it's success. For me, it's good enough. Anything is good enough for me. Any water in the ocean, any drop, it's good enough for me. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next.